Okay, about like 19,000 of y'all are aware that this is not the first or second time I've uploaded this video. I keep getting restricted because YouTube really does not like that how do I say it? That green thing that, you know, that grows from the YouTube don't like that green thing, bro. You know what I'm talking about, bro. So I literally purged every mention of that green thing out of this video. So if it gets monetized again, bro, I don't know, bro. But yeah, enjoy, I guess. YouTube, please leave me alone.
Tonight, we're learning more about the two Mariposa County High School basketball players arrested on suspicion of...
A star basketball player who just signed with the Runnin' Rebels is now facing DUI charges after police say he caused...
The 17-year-old high school basketball player has been jailed since last fall.
Telling me that whatever the doctor found on his skull, she does not know what she's talking about.
Yo, what's good, y'all? Spinbackoa, and welcome back to the dark side of high school basketball, part 2. Let me get a round of applause.
Just made a cool 5 on this good ass week. I'm the one who created. Come with their hug going up.
We made it. Before we start, I just want to take the time to thank all of y'all for all the subscriptions and the views that came from my last vid. When I posted part 1, I was literally just trying, and I had no idea it would do anything close to what it did. I genuinely appreciate all the love, the positive feedback, the racism, and the constructive criticism you all left for me. Y'all got me feeling like the rookie of the year, man. But that's neither here or there. If you're new here, in the first part, I basically told 4 stories of highly touted high school basketball players who committed serious crimes which jeopardized their futures. I mean, aside from the last story. But anywho, I got 4 more even crazier stories of the like just for y'all today. If you haven't watched part 1, please go watch it before you watch this one, as these stories are intended to get increasingly wilder and darker as the series progresses. And I'm picking up right where I left off. It's not a must, but it'd be very much appreciated. Thank y'all again. Without further ado, let's lock in. Nobody I will ever talk about in this series has a story quite as unique as Dior Johnson. Self-proclaimed him, self-proclaimed most hated, and one of the most polarizing high school basketball players we've seen in the social media age, period. A 6'2", 180-pound point guard, Dior was another prospect in that insane 2022 class I talked about in the previous video that included current NBA rising stars like Brandon Miller, G.G. Jackson, and the Thompson twins, to name a few. For the majority of Dior's high school career, he sat comfortably at the top of the rankings, and as a freshman, he debuted as the 4th-ranked player in the entire class above names like Keontae George and Amari Bailey. And it wasn't for no reason. Not only was he just genuinely an elite basketball player early on, he was the show. He had a lovable arrogance to him and that New York streetball flair to his game that made a lasting impression on fans and scouts alike. And combined with that, Dior was just infamously kind of an asshole. He was very big on social media, which obviously isn't a bad thing on its own, but anybody who was there a couple years ago could attest to the fact that he kind of enjoyed being the center of attention. He started internet beef with other hoopers for literally no reason. He was always in some drama with some girl, and on the court, he was known for talking absolutely crazy. And I like trash talk, but it was clips like this that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way.
He has no offers. He's a bum. You stupid, nigga. I'm going to Howard, nigga. Howard. What's wrong with you?
But you know, stuff like that gets clicks, and he was an elite talent. So naturally, wherever he went, a camera followed. And this nigga went to a lot of places. But we'll get to that a little later. First, I need to tell you about Dior's upbringing. Let me take it back. Born in 2004, Dior hails from Kingston, New York, a town about 90 miles north of New York City. There's nothing particularly noteworthy about Kingston, as Dior is probably the most famous person you or I both know from there, which is pretty damn sad in its own right. But I say this to say, even though it's not the trenches per se, nobody really makes it out of Kingston, especially when you have the type of background Dior does. He was raised there by a single mother and grandmother who did their best to give Dior everything he needed growing up. Dior's love of basketball came from the latter of the two, as at the age of 5, his grandmother would introduce him to the sport that he would fall so deeply in love with later on. He knew from then that all he wanted in life was to make it to the NBA. According to his mother, when they'd pray at night before bed, Dior would make it a priority to pray for his basketball. I promise I did not make that shit up. He didn't have a formal trainer growing up. Everything he knew was self-taught by either going outside and playing pickup games in the local park or watching and studying the games of his favorite NBA players growing up, namely Kobe Bryant or Kyrie Irving, whom he'd later draw comparisons to. Dior had a one-of-a-kind meteoric rise to stardom, and this isn't just me being hyperbolic. Off rip, Dior quickly separated himself athletically from the rest of his peers. Kids his age couldn't fuck with him. In AAU, he'd consistently play up multiple age groups, and coaches would take note of his creativity and fearlessness. At the age of 8, Dior and his family would pack up and move to Saugerties, a small town about 15 minutes away from Kingston. It was there where his name would be forever etched in the history books. By the age of 12, as a 7th grader, Dior would become a varsity starter at Saugerties High. A 12-year-old playing varsity basketball. I think at the age of 12, I was picking my boogies and playing jetpack joyride. And that wasn't it. Dior was cooking. He'd go on to average 22 points per game throughout the season, all against kids that were up to 7 years older than him. The entire population of Saugerties would hear the stories of little Dior dropping dimes, pulling from 40 feet, and breaking off defenders en route to 30-point games. The gyms were consistently packed out, and he was becoming a sort of small-town legend. Fast forward a year later, and in his 8th grade year, Dior was averaging 30 points per game and broke the New York State record as the youngest player to hit 1,000 points in his career, all before even setting foot on a high school campus. Now, I know what some of y'all are probably thinking. Oh wait, let go of his balls. But I really want y'all to get the full illustration of the precursor to everything that happens later on. So just bear with me as I tell this nigga's life story. Obviously, what Dior was doing wasn't going unnoticed. It started making waves nationally, and he caught the attention of several prep school coaches across the country. Dior would play 8 more games as a freshman at Saugerties before he decided to venture out, broaden his horizons, and play better competition. Now, remember a couple minutes ago when I said he went to a lot of places and that I'd get to it later? Yeah, strap in. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to what I like to call the Dior Johnson World Tour. He had a remarkably nomadic high school basketball career, and nomadic is putting it lightly. This is all very relevant info, and I could go in depth, but for the sake of staying on topic, I'm going to try to expedite this as much as possible. Here's the breakdown. So he starts off at Saugerties Senior High in New York, which I just explained. Then in August of 2018, he transferred to the prestigious IMG Academy in Florida. He transferred here for his freshman year and lasted a cool month before he picked up an unfortunate foot injury and transferred back to Saugerties in the middle of the season. He wouldn't be back home for long though. From there, he transferred to Findlay Prep in Nevada, which literally shut down before he got to play a single game. This is the only one where you can't really fault him. Findlay produced some NBA players like Kelly Oubre, Dylan Brooks, and PJ Washington if you're unfamiliar. Although he didn't play a single game, he finished the school year here. Now that puts our school counter at 3, all in his freshman year, and I fear we're not even halfway through. In the summer before his sophomore year, he'd be contacted by LeBron James and invited to play for his AAU team, Strive for Greatness. Dior would move to the West Coast and LeBron would sort of take him under his wing, becoming the go-to guy on the team. This did a lot for his clout. He was the center of attention. People paid more attention to him than they paid attention to LeBron's own son. On his own damn team, pretty much a dream come true for any young hooper. This is where he became a true national name. He was cooking niggas all summer. Dior would then take his talents to Hillcrest Prep in Arizona at the beginning of his sophomore year, where he wouldn't even make it to the start of the season before leaving. Then he made a short pit stop at Fairfax Senior High School in LA, where, you guessed it, he also didn't play, before finally settling at Mayfair High School in nearby Lakewood, California. Spoiler alert, this is the only school where Dior actually played a full season. To be fair though, it was pretty eventful. He played here with Josh Christopher and every game was mixtape worthy before COVID ended it a bit prematurely. But who gives a damn? Not Dior, because at the completion of the school year, he'd pack his bags and move across the country to the legendary Oak Hill Academy in Virginia. He transferred here for his junior year, but left after he picked up another injury to that same foot. The circumstances around this stint are a little shady, as he literally just up and left without telling anybody, including the coaches and staff. It's stated that he was here with his mother, who was in California at the time, trying to take care of the injury, but allegedly he ignored all calls, texts, and emails from the coaching staff up there and just never returned. Weird. He would then enroll at Corona Centennial High School in California, aka Jared McCain High, where he'd actually play some games. This was still during the social distancing era right after COVID, so they didn't play a full-fledged schedule, but he was still able to get some work in. In 2021, for his senior year, he'd enroll at Prolific Prep, play half the season, and then finally, at the end of 2021, Southern California Academy, where he'd finish his high school career. Goddamn. Of course, a lot of shit happened in between. He committed to Syracuse. His grandmother passed away. He had inappropriate relations with a 25-year-old woman at the age of 16. He decommitted from Syracuse, committed to Oregon, decommitted from Oregon, got veneers, and some other things. But yeah, now a couple takeaways. One, that transcript was probably on fire. And two, I'm sure by now everybody who's been paying attention has probably realized that Dior has some serious commitment issues. Now, I'm not here to psychoanalyze him. I'm just a nigga with a computer. But there's just no good rationalization for 10 schools in 6 different states over the course of 4 years. No good rationalization at all. I saw a comment on my last video that stated that basketball creates a lot of narcissists. And while I don't completely agree personally, because narcissism is a medical term and I feel like it shouldn't be thrown around as casually as it is, I do think that Dior had an inflated ego and developed a major case of main character syndrome throughout the course of his life. And this is just kind of evident when you look at all the facts in its entirety. I mean, he had such an unordinary adolescence. We're talking about somebody who, as a 14-year-old boy with no father, achieve more than 99% of athletes in the same position are able to do in double the amount of time. Having the public eye on you, media publications, and hundreds of thousands of followers on social media through it all only added to it. So when you combine these conditions, having the status and clout that you do at such a young age with no solid foundation to keep you in check, I don't think it's crazy to say that it can warp your perception of your place in life in relation to those around you. It's not crazy to think that those conditions can lead to someone abandoning ship at the slightest inconvenience. And it's not crazy to think that those conditions can turn you into an inconsolable dickhead of a human being who does shit like this. After 3 separate college decommitments, Dior finally found his way to the University of Pittsburgh, where, as their 3rd highest rated recruit ever, he'd be looking to further his dream of becoming an NBA player as he so desperately desired. Being as highly touted as he was coming out of high school, he was fully expected to start from the get-go. The path to the league was crystal clear, without any obstructions or obstacles impeding him from doing what needed to be done. But, you know, yeah. In early September 2022, Dior Johnson had been in his on-campus apartment at Pitt. With Dior was his girlfriend, who had just flown into Pittsburgh from California to spend some quality time with him. The events that followed would prove to be anything but quality though. Police were called to his apartment located at the 3400 block of Forbes Avenue for reported spanning a 3-day period from the 5th to the 7th. The girl, who we're gonna call Ashley for the sake of the story, claimed that on the night of the 5th, Dior with quote full force, leaving it red and puffy for getting him and his phone wet. He would then steal her phone and leave the apartment at around midnight, only to return at around 4 a.m. and give it back to her. The details only get grislier from here, so another trigger warning is in order. The next morning, on the 6th at around 8:30 a.m., an hour-long argument would ensue that escalated to something even worse. Johnson would allegedly strike Ashley in the head, arms, and stomach continuously. According to police, Ashley dialed 911 quote in fear of her life, but he ran after her with scissors, took the phone, hung it up, and threw it across the room. Johnson was then accused of effectively smothering her and quote making it hard for her to breathe, according to the criminal complaint. Dior then allegedly to quote make himself, apparently in an attempt to make it seem like Ashley was the aggressor in the event that she was able to call the police. He then tried to call out of practice before leaving, which is when she was then able to leave as well. Included in the criminal complaint, there were pictures of her bruised body, including bruises on her arms, collarbone, shoulder, and chest, alongside a copy of her medical discharge report from the local hospital where she received treatment for the bruises and a concussion. Following a month-long investigation, Dior was arrested on October 7th, 2022, facing 5 total charges, including 2 felony charges of and 3 misdemeanor charges of unlawful restraint causing serious bodily injury, simple assault, and false imprisonment. Later that same day, Pitt would indefinitely suspend him from the team. 8 days would pass when on October 20th, 3 of those 5 charges would be dropped in court as the victim testified remotely via Zoom. 1 charge of misdemeanor simple assault and the felony strangulation charge were upheld against him. Now this is the part of the story where the young athlete with incredible motions beast-ass lawyers do what they do best. On the 8th of December, Dior struck a plea deal with the prosecution and pleaded guilty to the misdemeanor charge of simple assault, resulting in a 1-year probation sentence with the conditions that he doesn't come in contact with the victim, he undergoes a mental health evaluation and necessary treatment, enters a batterer's intervention program and pays his court costs. Yep. Now, Pitt wasted no time reinstating Dior, as they would do so on the 28th of the same month, and he'd return to practice the same day. This was much to the dismay of every woman on campus. See, the University of Pittsburgh had already been in pretty hot water with their student body after a recent unrelated incident of an on-campus had triggered massive protests, with students questioning whether or not the administration was truly taking the necessary initiative to protect them against these crimes. They didn't feel all that safe, so the decision to reinstate Dior, let alone him still being allowed to be enrolled at the school, understandably felt to them like a slap in the face. One Pitt student, and more importantly, a domestic violence survivor, was quoted saying, "I think that Pitt's decision to reinstate Dior Johnson sends a message to everyone at the university that his position on the team matters more than the woman he..." That's tough. However, a sort of belated poetic justice came to them a year later when, under a new administration, it was determined that Dior wasn't allowed to be a student at the University of Pittsburgh any longer. The new administrators found that his plea deal violated the school's code of conduct. I don't know how the last administration couldn't come to the same conclusion, but anywho, Dior would meet with the coaching staff at Pitt, and they advised him that his best bet would be to play overseas or find a junior college and get back on the court as soon as possible. He would leave the school in August of 2023. Okay, to wrap this shit up, literally only one college was interested in Dior given his rap sheet, which was a lil JUCO in bumfuck Texas named Clarendon College. As of today, Dior has just come off of a season where he averaged some crazy ass numbers, and he's right back in the mix for a move back to the Division I level. So in typical American fashion, we all gonna just pretend this shit just never happened. Okay, is that cool with everybody? Okay. Update, Dior found a school. He landed somewhere. Does anybody want to take an educated guess as to where he landed? I'll give you a second. UCF, the University of Convicted Felons. Yes, this means Dior Johnson will be taking the court with Mikey Williams. Hide your girlfriends and hide your guns. Tony Farmer, a 6'6" power forward from Ohio, was a top 100 player in the class of 2013. Born and raised in Cleveland, Farmer was the star athlete at Garfield Heights High School. Ranked as the #1 player in the state at one point, Tony was a skilled do-it-all wing who was a plus athlete and had an excellent motor. At least, that's what the scout said. In my humble opinion, and from the highlights I'm watching right now, this nigga was kind of ass. He kind of just looked like one of those players that's bigger and marginally more athletic than everybody else. In my brain, this is what you get if you throw current Draymond Green into a game against the sons of a bunch of former congressmen from the American Midwest. But what do I know? Anywho, Tony was a highly sought after prospect regardless of what spinbackoa thinks, as he had offers from several big name colleges like Michigan, Michigan State, and Virginia Tech, amongst a plethora of others. And he was well on his way to becoming an integral piece to one of these programs. 1 single year away, to be exact. But on April 23rd, 2012, a terrible decision that only lasted a mere 5 minutes or so would completely wipe all of that away. Tony, who was only 18 years old at the time, wrapping up his junior year of high school, would meet his then girlfriend, 18-year-old Andrea Lane, in the lobby of her Bedford Heights apartment building. To this day, we don't have a lot of context or backstory to the buildup of the assault, not to insinuate that any sort of context could somehow justify his actions or anything like that, but I'd just like to throw that out there for anybody curious. However, reportedly, it was because she, quote, didn't want to reconcile their relationship after breaking up with him. Shockingly enough, the entire incident was captured on CCTV camera. Now, I know some of you would like for me to show you the footage in its entirety, but out of respect for the victim and for the sake of me not getting beamed off the fucking platform, I'm gonna kind of chop out the most egregious parts of the assault while I just explain everything that happened. If you are so curious to watch the full unedited clips, feel free to go look. Here we go. Andrea is first seen exiting an elevator with a backpack on. She approaches Tony, who can be seen sitting on a couch off screen. It looks like she might be saying something to him, but given the quality of the video, it's pretty hard to tell. Tony then lunges at Andrea with balled up fists, which causes her to retreat out of fear, moving all the way back towards the elevator. Tony then stands over Andrea, looks to his right, which I assume was to see if anybody was there to watch. Then they exchange some words as he grabs the backpack Andrea has in her hands. Keep in mind that Tony is all of 6 feet and 6 inches and 220 pounds doing this to Andrea, who's reportedly 5'4". Tony then hits Andrea on the right side of her face as she collapses and rolls over on the floor in pain. She quickly gets up and tries to create some distance between the two, retreating to a corner, covering her face with her hand. According to police, she pled with Tony to stop what he was doing. It's out of the line of sight of the camera at this point, but it looks like he's essentially manhandling her, just throwing her around any type of way before walking away with the backpack now in his possession. When he walks away, Andrea tries to get up off the floor, but Tony turns back around with his fist balled again. Now that's where the first video ends, but police say that he then dragged her outside and continued the... Which brings us to the second video where, and I just gotta say, watching this feels like a horror movie. Andrea is seen in the vestibule trying to use what I'm pretty sure is a phone while looking out the window trying to see if Tony is approaching her or not. She does in fact spot him approaching, to which she immediately jumps in the corner, cowering in fear as Tony makes his way towards her. He gets inside, grabs her by the arm, and attempts to yank her out of the building before retreating himself and saying some words to her while pointing in a mocking fashion. And then he tries to yank her again as she fights him off, all while seemingly banging on the glass trying to alert somebody to help. He leaves and she stands up and attempts to use the phone again. And that's when he runs back inside, she falls to the ground, and he begins to multiple times. She gets up and desperately bangs on the glass again, looking for anybody who can help her. That's that. By that point, Tony had already vacated the premises, but Andrea's neighbors heard the commotion and called 911. Tony will be arrested later on and booked into Cuyahoga County Jail on charges of kidnapping and robbery. He posts a $10,000 bail and be out the same day, with a protective order placed against him on Andrea's behalf. When trial began a couple months later in August, another charge of intimidation was added to his case after it was revealed that he violated the no contact order by sending menacing text messages towards Andrea after the initial assault, threatening her, saying that he, quote, should have done more. Present at the trial was his family, his coach Sonny Johnson, and 2 of his former teachers. A couple of them would give impact statements in support of Tony, with Johnson asking the judge to be lenient with her sentencing in hopes that Tony could still pursue his basketball career. Johnson tried to convince Judge Pamela Barker that Tony understood the seriousness of what he did and was quoted saying, "I'm here to say with my heart that this young man, if you give him an opportunity, 5 years from now, he's gonna make you proud. I know it. I know him. And if you give him a chance, he's in good hands." He put on a true performance too, but he had a singular tear running down his cheek and everything. His mother would say that he was simply a young man in love and, quote, made a bad decision. One of Tony's teachers would go on the record telling the judge that, quote, instead of his massive height, I see his massive heart. The most shocking of the impact statements, however, came from the victim herself. Despite the terrible abuse she endured by his hands, she would take the stand and plead with the judge on behalf of Tony, stating, with tears in her eyes, that he doesn't belong in jail. Check it out.
He really needs help. I don't think jail will give him that. I don't know what was wrong with him that day. I know he was a good person. I hope he still is. I hope he learns from this.
Now, I know that might look bad to some of y'all, but just check me out. Y'all's minds probably went to the, oh, she trying to secure the bag trope that we sometimes see with women who date athletes. And I ain't mad at you, but I implore you to look at it objectively. Victims of domestic abuse, whether it be violence, sexual abuse, or financial or what have you, very commonly have a hard time detaching themselves from the relationship. An abusive relationship can create weird ass emotional attachments that us more fortunate folk will never truly understand. Feelings of guilt or a distorted sense of loyalty and responsibility are often developed through manipulative tactics from the abuser. It's never just the physical act. If he was bold enough to beat on her the way he did in a semi-public, highly surveilled space, and then afterwards text her phone threatening her even further, then there's no telling what he did or said to her behind closed doors. Just think about it. Oh yeah, and she was a teenager. Am I bugging? Man, back to the story. Yeah. Judge Barker wasn't going for any of that. She would sentence Tony to 3 years for the kidnapping charge, 2 years for the assault, and 2 years for robbery, for a grand total of 7 years in prison. Or at least that's what it should have been. Tony's sentences would run concurrently, which would mean he'd effectively serve for each charge at the same time, resulting in a measly 3-year sentence, which I'm sure we'd all agree is pretty light considering what he did. But you know who didn't think it was light? Tony ass. Upon hearing the news, Tony would faint in the courtroom. And as some of y'all have probably already clocked minutes ago, yes, this is the moment that created the infamous bruh meme.
The court orders that the defendant shall serve a term of 2 years on that count as well.
What's 9 plus 10?
21.
Bruh.
Spell BMW. E-E-W. Where do you hear the E? The first in the middle.
You dumbass motherfucker.
Bruh.
Yeah, them hoes didn't age that well. But it's honestly so fascinating that a meme that viral and that stupid could stem from something that dark. It's a crazy juxtaposition. Also, there's something hilarious about him hearing the amount of time he got and then looking at his lawyer in disbelief. I got 5 years? Yeah, nigga. And then feigning. Feigning is crazy. It's like, oh no, I can't beat the shit out of my girlfriend on camera and get away with it. The irony in Tony facing the consequences of his actions, acting like a joke of a human being, and then becoming forever immortalized as a joke is just too fucking funny. But I digress. It actually gets worse from here. One of the conditions given to Tony during the sentencing was that his sentence would be reviewed after 180 days served for a potential early release, provided that he could showcase some growth as a human being, show some maturity and remorse for what he did. Obviously, that's not what ended up happening. In a weird twist to this case, it was found that Tony had been writing a series of inappropriate letters to an unnamed 17-year-old girl at Garfield Heights High School. Maybe that wouldn't have been the weirdest thing in the world on its own, but it gets so much weirder. For one, she wasn't the direct recipient of those freaky ass letters. Remember Tony's coach that gave the teary-eyed plea at his sentencing? Yeah. He took it upon himself to become a sort of mailman who made sure those freaky letters made it to their destination. For some odd reason, unbeknownst to the rest of humanity, Tony would write the letters, send them to Coach Johnson's address, and from there, Coach Johnson would secretly give it to this unnamed 17-year-old girl during school. Sonny Johnson, please come to the front. You mean to tell me you was playing wingman for 2 my nigga? All of this came to light while investigating Tony's behavior during his sentence. At the hearing, a letter written by the girl's mother would reveal a plethora of things to Judge Barker. When she initially found out about the letters her daughter had been receiving, she went straight to the superintendent and demanded a meeting to get to the bottom of it. During the meeting, she dropped a bombshell that, quote, Tony had on school grounds while he was 18 and she was still a minor. And her daughter, quote, let it be known on the record that Tony had been for some time. The mother also told the judge that, quote, my daughter also informed the superintendent that she told Coach Johnson of the abuse and he did nothing. After this revelation, the local news interviewed Coach Johnson. They would ask, the mother is quite upset with you. Can you understand why she's upset? Johnson responded, I don't know nothing. I mean, you got to talk to the superintendent. Seriously, really talk to them. Okay, bro. When they reached out to the superintendent, he issued a statement that read in part, any incidents of student misconduct brought to our attention, including the matter you've asked about, are immediately investigated and promptly addressed in accordance to the board policy and federal and state laws. The matter was investigated and referred to Garfield Heights Police Department and Child and Family Services. Basically some corporate PR bullshit, but y'all know how that goes. Most importantly though, when they requested Coach Johnson's personnel file, it was revealed that after a school district internal investigation, Superintendent Terrence Olszewski notified Johnson that his mailman stunt was potentially grounds for termination, but ultimately decided that instead, he'd be suspended for a staggering 3 days without pay, and then reduced the punishment to a written reprimand. According to the superintendent's letter to Johnson, quote, accepting mail at your home for our students is inappropriate and outside the standard of care. Our staff members are not the U.S. mail. Excellent observation, Mr. Olszewski. Now, according to a police report filed after the superintendent notified police about the complaint regarding Farmer's treatment of the 17-year-old girl, the mother wished no police actions for the assaults that took place while in school. However, in her letter to the judge, she asked her to consider her daughter's experience while deciding whether or not Tony was granted his early release. So yeah, pretty fucking weird, but I'll let y'all be the judge on that one. Back to the main story. Yeah, so Judge Barker said hell no. Tony would serve his time at the Grafton Correctional Institution and get out in 2015. 3 long years in the slammer is just what a young man like him needed to get back on the right path. And it seemed like it worked. Upon release, Tony would go on a bit of a PR tour. He'd go to multiple schools across the country and speak to kids, students, and young athletes alike about violence against women, using his personal experience as an example of the potential consequences and how it can affect everybody involved. He'd be quoted saying, "Honestly, it's pretty simple. Before any action, just really sit down and think. Think before you act. Anything can happen. You have to be on your toes and pay attention to your surroundings at all times. Really, learn from my mistake and from everyone else who's made a big, crucial mistake in their life." Just 2 months after becoming a free man, he'd signed to play at Lincoln College in Lincoln, Illinois, a JUCO where he could spend 2 years playing and then transfer to a big name school and really reignite his journey of becoming a potential NBA prospect. However, Lincoln would deny his admission for obvious reasons. Just like Dior in the previous story, Tony had a tough time finding a school that would actually accept him, not only because of his high-profile assault case, but for the simple fact that Tony hadn't played a game of competitive basketball in over 3 years. There was doubt as to whether the risk in taking someone with the baggage he had would even be worth the hassle. There's always one though, and you can bet your ass it was in Texas. Tony would make his way to Baytown, the location of Lee College, a Division I JUCO. As a 21-year-old freshman in the 2015 season, he made 31 appearances for the Running Rebels, averaging 17 points, 9 rebounds, and 2 assists per game on 53% shooting, finishing the year as their leading scorer and rebounder. The next year was more of the same, neither really improving or declining, as he put up virtually the same exact stat line of 17 points, 9 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. By all means though, Tony was hooping. He might have had a little too much dip on his chip though, because after the completion of the 2017 to 2018 season, he declared for the 2017 NBA draft.
Don't laugh. Jack. Don't. Oh, Jack. Jack, stop laughing, man.
Allow me to put it into perspective for y'all. In the history of the league that has existed for almost 100 years, about 4,000 to 5,000 players have played a game. Only 4 have been drafted straight from a JUCO to the NBA. All of them had much better numbers than Tony. And I can guarantee you, none of them powwowed their girlfriend. Or at least as far as we know. You never know with these niggas. Needless to say, he went undrafted. It wasn't the end of the world for Tony though. There are plenty of professional basketball leagues in the world, and clearly he had plans to play in every single one of them. In 2018, Tony would start his pro journey in the Continental Basketball Association, which is like the 8th ranked basketball league here in the US. Then he found himself playing in Qatar, which is a decent step up, I guess. After Qatar, he made his way to Mexico. Then he played in Ecuador and then in Bolivia and Argentina in the same year. Went back to Mexico. Then the next year he played in the Saudi league, Bahrain, and then Syria. And I should clarify, he's bouncing around, but he's still being productive everywhere he's going. He's averaging over 20 points per game in a couple of these leagues on decent shooting splits. It ain't the NBA, but 20 points is 20 points. Most recently, he's back in Mexico again, where he's a 2-time All-Star doing his thing. They love him out there. Tony is finally doing what he was put on earth to do, and it seems like his past mistakes are just that, a thing of the past. Just kidding. In September of 2020, ESPN broke the news that a warrant was out for Tony's arrest in the state of Louisiana. If you guessed that it was for domestic assault, you'd be correct. And just like the first incident that threw his life off course 8 years earlier, it was caught on camera. Take a look. Tony would find himself at the center of a public dispute between him and his then girlfriend, Nikki Mano. She had been the one who posted the ring camera footage capturing the incident that got the warrant issued in the first place. The Instagram post had gone semi-viral, and as a result, to fight back, he'd post a series of videos he recorded showing videos of Nikki berating Tony while attempting to break down a door in their house. The ring camera footage wasn't it though. She would also post multiple pictures of herself with bruises, blackened eyes, and claiming that the wasn't just limited to that one night. It was an absolute shit show. Tony would do an interview with this guy, and no, I'm not controlling. Tony would do an interview with Spoken Reasons a couple days after, where he would deny every claim of abuse that Nikki made. He would tell his own version of events, claiming that the injuries in the pictures she posted came from another ex, not him. During the interview, when asked about the ring camera footage and why he was dragging Nikki by her neck, he said this.
She chased me out the house with a bleach bottle. She's hitting me. She's throwing bleach all over me and my clothes. I tried to turn around and grab her, by her waist. Obviously, when somebody's tussling with you and things like that, she's slipping down, trying to get away from me. I didn't mean to. I meant no harm to the person. I wasn't choking her. My left hand ended up around her neck to pull her back into the house. Just a fact, like I'm a big guy. My hand is big. If I choke somebody, I don't think, my personal opinion, I don't think you able to scream the way she did. So after I threw her back into the house, I took off running.
My hand ended up around her neck to pull her back into the house. Okay, nigga. Surprisingly, nothing came out of that warrant though, as far as I can see, as Tony didn't go back to jail and he's still currently playing basketball in Mexico as we speak. So maybe the abuse wasn't one-sided. Clearly, this was a toxic relationship. I don't doubt that. But this is the fact of the matter. When you have the past that someone like Tony does, you aren't afforded the benefit of the doubt in situations like these. The entire world has seen you put your hands on a woman unprovoked. So any claim otherwise would be pretty hard to believe, no? And then you gotta ask yourself, how do I keep getting myself in these situations? You travel across the country to speak against domestic violence, using your personal experience as a cautionary tale, and talked about how much you've grown. 8 years later, with your hands around this woman's neck, how much growth was really done? Zaon Collins was a 6'1" point guard from Las Vegas, Nevada. Ranked as the 42nd best player in the class of 2021, he attended the ever so prestigious Bishop Gorman High School, arguably the best private school in the country, in terms of athletics at least. A 4-star, Zaon was known for being one of the quickest and most intelligent players in his class. I remember him kind of being like a bootleg Sharif Cooper. Zaon won the state championship with the Bishop Gorman Gales every year he played with them, with the exception of his senior year due to COVID. Outside of school, he played travel ball with Vegas Elite, where he'd hoop alongside the likes of Jalen Green and Josh Christopher. He was a class below those guys I just mentioned, but that's a testament to just how much trust his coaches had in him, and how much they loved what he brought to their team as a lead guard. He always seemed composed and in control, and that high praise extended off the court as well. The Vegas Elite program director Brian Sitter was quoted saying, "It's hard to put into words, but it was this definite charm, charisma that he had, where it's like you could never be mad at the kid. He brought people together. You wanted to be around him. You wanted to hang with him. Whatever that word is, he definitely had it." Blazing his ass off. Couldn't be mad at the kid? I wonder why one would be inclined to get mad at Zaon. What was he doing to make his coaches mad? We'll get to that in a second. Zaon was a highly sought-after prospect in that 2021 class, boasting offers from powerhouses like Baylor, Gonzaga, Arizona, and USC. Even with those huge offers on the table and several more to choose from, he decided to stay put and become the hometown hero, signing with the UNLV Rebels in August of 2020. Coaches and staff at UNLV expected Zaon to come in immediately and spearhead a return to former glory under new coach TJ Otzelberger. Despite all that, the older Zaon got and the more he progressed through high school, it seemed like he sort of became nonchalant and unconcerned with hoops. Multiple people close to the program said he was often late for practices, kind of just operating on his own time. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and try to convince y'all that being late to a basketball practice as an upperclassman is some big bad thing, but the thing with Zaon is that he was rarely held accountable for his punctuality or lack thereof. Again, in most circumstances, this is a non-issue. Things like that are just liberties extended to the biggest and best players. You kind of just let them do what the fuck they want because you can't afford to lose them. But those bad habits and the subsequent lack of accountability that came afterward were direct indicators of what would happen next. Zaon was notably a reckless driver. Between 2017 and 2019, he was cited 4 separate times for traffic violations, including failure to pay full attention to the road, which is pretty vague, but I'm sure y'all get the point. 1 instance of driving the wrong way on a one-way street, and speeding more than 20 miles over the speed limit, 2 separate times. Every one of those violations was handled by either paying a fine or completing a defensive driving course. There was a growing trend of Zaon doing bullshit and then not properly feeling the consequences of said bullshit. And the culmination of it all is one of the more devastating stories I've ever heard of. To remind you again, Zaon's senior season, or what was supposed to be a senior season, took place in late 2020. Because of the pandemic, the state of Nevada made the decision to postpone the season until January, 2 whole months ahead of the usual start date in November. They be playing an abbreviated schedule with no postseason, lasting a mere 6 weeks. Like so many other people across the world who suffered during the pandemic, this negatively affected him as well. Any semblance of a sense of structure or routine that he once had completely been thrown off kilter. His focus was cooked. It had already been deteriorating, and this was the cherry on top. Sitter was quoted saying, "He probably didn't answer the phone as much as he usually did. He wasn't as responsive. He was starting to slip. These kids are going through a lot of depression going on, and the way they handle it is sad for some of them. I really feel like he was starting to fall into some kind of funk. He obviously wasn't making the same type of choices he would normally make. Now, Zaon did play basketball at the end of 2020. Gorman, like many other schools across the country, would bend the rules and play under a club designation. That means instead of playing standard organized games under the school name, they'd play glorified scrimmages under a sort of alias, wearing jerseys not issued by the school. For example, Sierra Canyon became California Basketball Club. Coronado became Air Nado, so on and so forth. Zaon would play one event with Gorman in October, and then in December he played with the Las Vegas Pilots, a makeshift team made of some of his Gorman teammates mixed in with some other kids from around the Vegas area. Okay, now the incident. On the afternoon of Thursday, December 30th, 19-year-old Zaon, driving his 2016 Dodge Challenger, found himself running late for a scheduled practice with the Pilots. He was speeding down Fort Apache Road, a residential street in suburban Vegas, going 88 miles per hour in a 35 mile per hour zone when he struck a white 2016 Hyundai Accent that was attempting to make a left turn. Upon impact, the Accent went airborne, flying across the intersection and eventually ending up pinned against the bricks of a perimeter wall nearby. Both cars were not only totaled, but mangled beyond recognition. Zaon miraculously survived the crash with minor injury for some reason, but the driver of the Hyundai, 52-year-old Eric Echevarria, sadly would not be as fortunate. He was rushed to the hospital where doctors tried everything they could to save his life, but was pronounced dead later that evening. Now, this is the part that fucks me up about this case. When police arrived at the scene of the crash, they searched what remained of Zaon's car. On the passenger side floor, there was a glass jar containing a green, leafy substance. Upon the discovery of the jar, police took a closer look at Zaon and noticed he had glassy, bloodshot eyes. I'll put it in simpler terms. Zaon Collins was off his ass behind the wheel when he killed Eric Echevarria. Shortly after the ambulance took Zaon to the hospital to tend to his injuries, a police officer applied for and obtained a search warrant to do a blood test on Zaon to see just how high he was. That blood test would change the whole complexion of this case. This is where it gets kind of tricky. For you to understand why this case proceeded the way it did, I have to explain to you how DUI laws work in the state of Nevada versus the rest of the country. I didn't study law, but neither did you. So I'm gonna put this into as simple terms as possible. And I'm gonna go quick, so stay with me. DUI laws are essentially split into three subsets: impairment, zero tolerance, and per se. Impairment basically means that a cop has to prove that you're under the influence based off of how you're acting, e.g. a field sobriety test. Say your ABCs backwards, walk in a straight line type shit. Zero tolerance is exactly what it sounds like. You can't have any level of or alcohol in your blood. This usually only applies to anybody under the age of 21. Per se is when they use the legal limit for the amount of or alcohol in your blood. It's federally set at 0.08 for alcohol everywhere in the country, which is like 4 or 5 beers for the average man. I don't drink. However, it varies from state to state. This is where the problem arises in the case of Zaon. Prosecutors elected to hit him with a felony charge of DUI causing a death on the basis of per se, in addition to felony reckless driving. The blood test came back that he tested 3 nanograms of. The legal limit in Nevada is 2. We will revisit this later. Zaon faced up to 25 years in prison on these charges, and UNLV subsequently dropped him a week later. The community was shocked, to say the least. They couldn't believe that their cherished young hometown hero had been the cause of such a horrific accident that robbed another valued member of the community of his life. Described by friends and family as loving, generous, and hardworking, 52-year-old Eric Echevarria was an Army vet and a custodian at a local elementary school who worked with special needs kids. The expectation was that the case would be resolved swiftly and severely in hopes that the family and community could get some closure as soon as possible. What took place instead was what a lot felt like was a severe miscarriage of justice. The Echevarria family ain't have a chance from the jump. Firstly, Zaon's family had every intention of pleading not guilty. They enlisted the help of Chesnoff and Schoenfeld, 2 of the most notorious defense attorneys in the nation, who, I should mention, decided to take this case free of charge because of the, quote, relationship and affection for members of Collins' family, the community he comes from, and the people that have followed his successes. Let me name off some of the people that Chesnoff and Schoenfeld have successfully represented. You probably ain't never heard of them. Cristiano Ronaldo, Mike Tyson, Suge Knight, Bruno Mars, and Michael Jackson. Zaon was released not even 24 hours later, and not because he posted bail. There was no bail. The judge over the case, Judge Bonaventure, who by the way is a Bishop Gorman alumni, wink wink, let him go home on a restricted release, citing his quote, strong community ties. The nigga essentially gave him a get out of jail free card. To put into perspective how uncommon and extremely lenient that was for a DUI case, let alone a DUI case where somebody died, the district attorney himself wanted to impose a $150,000 bail. Bail bondsmen in the Vegas area all expected $500,000. He didn't get one at all.
I was expecting like a $500,000 bail, to be quite honest, and monitoring. And when we said he got a word, we were like, what? How?
This demoralized Eric's family. The case hadn't even gone to trial yet, and they felt like they were already being denied their due. Unfortunately for them, the scales of justice would only tip out of their favor even further. In a post-hearing report done by the local news, they interviewed Zaon's lawyers, asking, he was at Bishop Gorman, a fancy, expensive private school. He drove a $30,000 car, and now he has a very high-profile, expensive attorney. How do we reconcile that? Chesnoff replied, first, his parents love him and want him to go to the best school. And he led the school, from what I understand, to 3 state championships. So there's a lot of people that are glad he went there. Secondly, the car was his dad's. And third, his very expensive lawyer is doing this at this time pro bono. I understand how the family of the fellow who died feels, but I also feel for a 19-year-old boy who has an incredible future that is now in jeopardy. All right, stop the fucking video. I gotta interject, bro. Lawyers be straight pieces of shit, dog. Never did this nigga just mention those 3 weak ass state championships. You see how they loading up the most generational slap on the wrist ever? F this nigga future. Somebody died. And I understand it's just their job. I'm not dumb. But look, I want to point out a bold-faced lie this nigga just told. He claimed that the car was not Zaon's. It was his dad's. I want you to look at the license plate of this car. Now, I want you to look at Zaon's Instagram username. Do you notice something, or am I like losing my mind? Anywho, Eric's sister-in-law was quoted saying, it's unfortunate that they're trying to make this kid look like a hero just because he knows how to play basketball. Yet he took someone who was a father, a grandpa, a husband, and a veteran. He was everything, yet they're not acknowledging that. They're only acknowledging that this kid was an athlete. But what good is an athlete when you're taking a hero? Now, remember those DUI laws I talked about? Zaon's defense argued that he wasn't actually impaired, nor could prosecutors prove that he was, citing the fact that it can take days to leave your system, and that the 3.0 that he tested was so low that he could have smoked days before the crash. On top of that, they argued that the legal limit in Nevada was way too low for the per se law to be constitutional, claiming that if he tested 3.0 anywhere else, it'd be legal. You know, if my pet dog had thumbs, I'd dap that nigga up. Mind you though, they weren't necessarily wrong. Of all the states where weed is legal, Nevada had the lowest legal limit for DUIs. It was 2.0. For reference, it's 5.0 literally everywhere else. Luckily for Zaon in his defense, the judge was in no rush at all to sentence him, as trial would drag on over the course of 3 whole years. So they had ample time to find any crease or inconsistency in the law to make sure he got off scot-free. In that in-between time, Zaon lived a pretty normal life, graduated high school, you know, just kicked it as if he ain't not too long before. Oh, also, the state of Nevada very conveniently passed a new DUI law in July of 2021. This new law stated that police could still test your blood and the limit of 2.0 was upheld, but now they had to be able to prove that you were actually high beyond a shadow of a doubt. Keep in mind, unlike alcohol, the methods used by police to properly diagnose a high are extremely new and very inconsistent and unreliable. So, even though Zaon had committed his crime over 1.5 years earlier, they insisted that this new statute should apply in his case, and on those grounds, they wanted the DUI charge thrown out completely. And that's exactly what happened. Because, you know, lawyers. They negotiated a plea deal to where the felony DUI causing death charge would be dropped if he pled guilty to the reckless driving charge, in addition to a new, lesser charge of misdemeanor vehicular manslaughter. Misdemeanor. On July 27th, 2023, Zaon was sentenced to 90 days in jail, 3 years probation, and 100 hours of community service. Very conveniently for him, his sentence just basically lasted the entire summer. Upon his release in August, he enrolled at Salt Lake Community College in Utah in an attempt to continue his basketball career. He played every single game as a 22-year-old freshman, averaging 6 points, 5 assists, and 4 rebounds a game. out there putting up Raymond Felton numbers. In the aftermath of the sentencing, people were understandably pissed off. The Echevarria family was no exception, but they were kind of just numb to it all at that point. Eric's wife, Anne Marie, was quoted saying, "It's a done deal. There's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing to talk about." Vegas area netizens took to Reddit and other online forums to voice their displeasure about how the case was handled. A lot of them seemed to think that there was some sort of conspiracy at hand, a concerted effort to give Zaon as lenient of a sentence as possible. I mean, looking at all the facts of the case, it just looked wonky as hell from the beginning. There were multiple people who were familiar with Zaon and knew how fast he liked to drive. There were multiple members of that neighborhood who could recall several instances of that same gray Dodge Challenger speeding up and down Fort Apache Road. Why his parents ain't take his keys is anybody's guess. The super expensive celebrity lawyer that spawned out of nowhere to take this DUI case pro bono, and then the judge who was a Gorman alumni letting Buddy walk free with no bail, only to give him the lightest possible sentence later on. I don't know. In any event, it's evident that Zaon walked through life on easy mode. Kids like him are bred when they never hear the word no. There's an even greater conversation to be had about the people in place who protected him and enabled this behavior. I'd like to give an introspective closing statement to this story, talking about the unfair advantages offered to people of higher socioeconomic status, but I don't think I can afford it. There's an old saying, I don't know where it comes from. I think the Boondocks or some shit. You can take a man out the streets, but you can't take the streets out the man. Now, without me giving any more context to that quote, let's get into the story. I'll try to make sense of it in the end. On the night of October 14th, 2017, at around 9 p.m., a man was found in an apartment complex breezeway located on the east side of Duluth, Georgia. 21-year-old Akeem Turner was found with multiple not conscious or breathing when police arrived to the scene. It went without saying that Akeem had been that night. When officers asked residents of the complex what had happened, one neighbor told him that he saw Turner in the car with a, quote, super tall white man, before another man ran up to the car and shouted something to the effect of, "Give me everything you got." Now, despite the fact that the witness didn't know who either of the suspects were, he would stress to police just how freakishly lanky and tall that man he saw was, and that both men looked very young. So, although police left the scene that night without any suspect in custody, the eyewitness account gave them a great start. It didn't take them long to zero in on a potential lead. After all, y'all would agree that there's a definite difference between tall and super tall, and there aren't that many super tall and lanky white boys just running around Duluth, Georgia in the first place. The next morning, law enforcement went to nearby Duluth High School and gave a description of the person they were looking for to the staff. There was only one single name that fit the bill, and that name was Alex Powell. Alex Powell was born on October 6th, 2000. He himself was 7 feet tall and stood head and shoulders above all of his peers for the majority of his adolescent years. But it wasn't just a case of a kid hitting the genetic lottery or anything like that. In every sense of the word, it ran in his blood. He came from a family of giants. Alex's mother, Barbara, was 6'7", and his sister, Katie, was 6'4". It didn't stop with his immediate family though, as at 7 feet tall, he wasn't even the tallest person in his family tree. His aunt was also 6'7" and had 2 kids that would end up being 6'9" and 7'2". What Alex and his extended family all had in common, aside from all being built like beanstalks, was the fact that they were all hoopers. Barbara was a big-time player at the University of Georgia back in the day and played overseas, and became a local coach and successful businesswoman in her later years. Katie recently played at UNLV for 4 years. His cousin Nancy had an extremely successful college basketball career, briefly played in the W, and now coaches at Texas A&M. The family was very involved and respected in the community. Everybody in Duluth knew of Coach Powell, notably how personable she was with kids and how much time she dedicated to youth development in the area. Given the big basketball background that the Powell family had, naturally, basketball was in the cards for Alex as well. He was a varsity starter at his hometown Duluth High School, a 3-star prospect in the class of 2019 with D1 offers from Florida Gulf Coast, Winthrop, and North Florida University. After his sophomore season, he garnered a lot of interest from prep school coaches across the country, and as a result, he'd make the decision to transfer to York Preparatory, located in South Carolina, for his junior season in 2017. So, how do we go from all that, being a promising, budding prospect from a respected family in suburban Georgia, to being a prime suspect in a murder case? After detectives were given the information they were looking for, they made their way to the Powell residence, but they did not arrest Alex that day. In fact, they didn't even speak to him. They spoke to his mother, giving her the rundown on how they had reason to believe her son was connected to a homicide. Now, obviously, like most parents would, she couldn't believe the shit that they were telling her, but the facts aligned way too much for it to be a simple mix-up or coincidence. They didn't have a warrant, so they left their information with Barbara in the event that Alex wanted to tell him what he knew. As you can imagine, the Powell family immediately lawyered up. There was no mistaking it. 17-year-old Alex Powell was the boy that witness saw in that car a couple nights earlier. He would turn himself in for questioning, accompanied by his lawyer. They offered to give a full and honest confession as to what went down the night Akeem was killed, but on one major condition. Alex could not under any circumstance be tried for. The DA agreed, and Alex proceeded to confess. In the confession, he would give detectives the name of the shooter, 16-year-old Victor Elijah Sherman, and explain the events that led up to that fateful night. It goes like this. Earlier that day on October 14th, Alex was at the local LA Fitness, a spot where he and his friends frequently went to play basketball. It was there where he was approached by another man only referred to in records as DJ, who, I should mention, has never been charged with this crime, citing a lack of evidence. DJ indicated to Alex that he wanted to go, quote, hit a lick, and they singled out Akeem Turner as their intended target. See, Akeem was known in the area as the neighborhood plug. The thought was that he carried large amounts of cash on him, and Alex and DJ had every intention to take what he had. They would enlist the help of Victor, who I previously mentioned, as he was known to possess a gun. Now, I don't know if these niggas thought that they were the Avengers or Suicide Squad or something, but anyway, at some point later, he contacted Akeem, telling him to meet up so he could purchase. Alex would go on to elaborate that they had agreed to meet at this location, the apartment complex, which investigators found out seemed to be a place Akeem commonly used to conduct his drug activity. So with all three of their wits combined, DJ, Alex, and Victor, they devised a robbery plan that went something like this. Alex would act as the setup guy. He would hop in the passenger side of Akeem's car to exchange the money for the. He would then pretend that he forgot the money for the and then yank the keys out of the ignition, effectively immobilizing Akeem. After yanking out the keys, Alex would run out the car, which would then give way for Victor to run up on the driver's side and stick him up with the gun, demanding whatever he had. Obviously, that's not how it went down. Everything went according to their plan until it actually came time for Alex to take the keys out of the ignition. As he sat in the passenger side of the car, Akeem was distracted as he measured out the amount of Alex intended to buy. When he went to pull the keys out, it was apparently much more difficult than he anticipated. When Akeem realized what was going on, he began to fight Alex to get his key back. Alex would escape the car in one piece, but not before getting his hoodie caught in the door on the way out, which he decided to ditch on the scene. Dumbass. Sadly, Akeem wasn't able to get his key back, and he would meet his untimely end moments later. A warrant was filed on October 25th, and Alex was formally arrested 5 days later on the 30th on charges of felony aggravated assault and armed robbery on a $500,000 bond. He would only actually spend a couple of months in jail pre-trial, as on January 22nd, 2018, his bond would be cut in half, reduced to $250,000. His mother, Barbara, would plead with the judge to give him the opportunity to finish school, saying that the initial bond of $500,000 was just too expensive to pay.
We think it's important for him to use this time waiting on his trial to get his high school diploma. I am willing to put up my house for Alex. It's not worth $500,000. It's worth about half of that. I believe that he's gonna do what he needs to do while he's out.
The victim's family obviously did not like this at all. They couldn't understand why someone who, in their eyes, was a cold-blooded who committed a premeditated crime would be given the opportunity to walk free amongst everyone else while their loved one was gone forever. Akeem's sister was quoted saying, "It seems like I'm in a nightmare."
Are we talking about the same person? Do you understand what's actually happening to me, to other people, and you just want him back in school? You want him safe?
His mother, Tony, went as far as to saying that she believed that he was probably safer in jail than free, for the simple fact that Alex snitched. There was no telling what could happen to him if he was released. Luckily for him though, his family was able to pay the $250,000 bond, and he was placed on house arrest. He would spend every single hour of every day in his home until time came for sentencing. The gunman wouldn't be nearly as fortunate. 16-year-old Victor Elijah Sherman, although being a juvenile at the time of the murder, would be tried as an adult, as he should. Victor's role in the botched robbery wasn't as clear-cut as it would seem. As it turned out, when Alex escaped from the car on foot and Victor jumped out to stick up Akeem entered fight or flight mode. You'd best believe he fought for his life. Basically, the much older Akeem whooped 16-year-old Victor's little ass, ripping his clothes and taking off one of Victor's shoes in the process. But sadly, not too many men can fight off a gun, as we all know how his story ended that night. But in a way, Hakeem helped solve his own. That singular shoe, in addition to the hoodie that Alex left behind, would be used as physical evidence in bringing both boys to justice. His bravery in that moment to fight for his life ultimately provided the crucial evidence needed to ensure that his attackers were held accountable. Victor would not be granted bond and would be sentenced to 20 years in prison with 10 years of probation to be served after. Now, before I wrap this story up, I want to double back to the whole thing about Alex's mom wanting him to finish school. According to school officials, Alex had dropped out of Duluth High School in 2016. Now, I'd like to point out that there's a clear distinction between dropping out and transferring. While conducting my research for this entry, I read this and thought it was just like a poor choice of words. But then I thought about it. This crime took place in the middle of the fall, October. What exactly was Alex doing in Duluth anyway, when he was supposed to have been enrolled in school all the way in South Carolina? It wasn't like he was home for the holidays or anything like that. What was it? Well, the fact of the matter is, I just don't fucking know. There's no public information about what Alex did between his stints at Duluth, York Prep, and the murder. I tried to talk to some of his former teammates, but they understandably felt like it wasn't their place to speak on it, and I just ended up feeling like a fucking cop. So yeah, nigga, you fill in the blank. You think he joined like a gang or something? Got like expelled? I don't know. Anyway, nobody could have anticipated that it would take as long as it did for Alex to be sentenced. On October 19th, 2022, over 5 years later, Alex was sentenced to 10 years in jail with 10 years probation to be served after that. We all know he's not serving that full shit. Now, at the beginning of this entry, I gave that quote. I'm not the smartest nigga in the world, as some of y'all have probably come to notice, but do y'all see how it kind of connects in almost an ironic sense? Alex had every type of advantage in his life from the jump. He came from a good family that lived in a good area, respected in the community, and never particularly had to struggle. They had money. He was a 3-star with Division I offers. 7-footers don't grow on trees, goddammit. With just a smidgen of decent work ethic, he could have made a career playing basketball. What business did he have hitting licks and being in the streets? I gotta refer back to Jessica from the last episode. You could make the safe assumption that she reverted back to her thuggish ways because that was simply the environment she came from. Robbing and stealing, struggling, that's all she knew. And then all of a sudden an old ass white man trotted into her life and took her out the hood because he saw her as a money glitch. All of that is an insane adjustment. The manner in which she reverted back to her old ways was a bit of a spectacle, but it wasn't surprising in the least. The struggle was all she knew. Hence, you can't take the streets out the man. With all that being said, what the f was Alex's excuse? Y'all see the consequences of trying to be something y'all not? Please, for any young man, woman, they, or them listening to my voice right now, be a good kid like your peoples raised you to be. Stay in school and don't be like this goofball. All right, I'm finna head out. But before I do, please subscribe and don't forget to leave a like on this video. It's a direct indicator that you fuck with this video and you would like to see more content. In the meantime, follow me on Twitter. That's the only place you could talk to me. Follow me at RUSpinning. There you can tell me how much you hate this video or whatever. But yeah, thank you for tuning in. I hope you learned something new today. Bye-bye.